Hi, and a very good evening to everyone. We welcome you all to today's webinar on digital workforce wellness. This is Yashang Gautam, your voice host, marketing and growth manager with the group of companies who are also hosting this event, namely Knowledge Synonyms, Digital Skunks, EasySim, and DSDG Agency. They are global learning and digital technology organizations that create future driven products and solutions. Our knowledge partners to this webinar are Synchrony, I Am Powered, and the author of Happiness at Work. The primary motive of conducting this webinar was to address these truly trying times. We are all somewhat struggling to maintain our physical and emotional energies to keep us going high and grow in all spheres of personal and professional life. Now, before we go any further, I want to review the functionality of this webinar. Your active participation is very important throughout the session. Right now, I have placed everyone on mute to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening to the webinar. Throughout the presentation, we will be managing the chat option located at the top right corner of the meeting window. However, if you have any questions during the webinar, please do write them down in the chat box provided. Alternatively, you can enter your questions and comments in the question box provided at the end of the presentation. If you rather ask in person, once you have raised your comments, I will unmute your line so you can go ahead and ask your question in person. I will now introduce our key speakers who will then address the audience and start their presentation. Firstly, I would like to introduce Dr. Nanlal Pathak, a musculoskeletal physiotherapist, ergonomist, and exercise specialist. He will be addressing to the audience the physical well-being pain related to posture and pancreas. Secondly, I would like to introduce Ms. Damani Grover, a counseling psychologist and hypnotherapist. She will be addressing ways to finding balance between chaos and strategies to manage work. Finally, we have Mr. R. Anand, a principal consultant and advisor, HR, adjunct professor, and also the author of Happiness at Work, published by Sage. He will be discussing about being a leader and team's well-being. Now, I would like to request Dr. Nanlal Pathak to start with his presentation.
Thank you, Yash. So I'm a musculoskeletal, and we can also say that orthopedic physiotherapist, ergonomics and exercise specialist. So what we are trying to do in here is we're trying to enhance the well-being of the employees who are working in a remote workforce and everything. So there are three dimensions to it, and we'll go through that quickly. So there is a physical dimension, and there is also emotional dimension, and also the whole organizational, that how organization can help with this transition that we are doing right now. So till now, the employee well-being has been assessed on the basis of maybe few blood tests or some assessment that a clinician will do, or sometimes maybe in your offices you must have seen some motivational talk or some team building activities, which was like a wellness thing that was happening in your offices when you're physically present there. But in current scenario, our digital workforce or people who are working remotely need a wholesome approach of wellness, covering both in physical, emotional, and organizational dimension. So where will inculcate fitness? So that is will be done by me. Then the work-life balance will be done by Damini, and then the whole developing a healthy organizational culture, which Mr. Anand will speak. So coming back to the topic, so physical well-being, pain, posture, and panacea. So when I was researching for this topic, and I stumbled upon few data which Google Trends has shows that there has been around 50% increase in the search queries related to posture. And what that shows is less people are conscious about being in posture. And there has been many memes and other things. In one of the memes, they compare a bad posture or a posture in which you are stooped a little bit down to a banana. So what I'm trying to cover in this is that, is your posture really bad, or is your posture causing you pain, and what you should do to prevent that pain? How this whole picture in terms of pain and posture related to your work productivity, and how the role of exercising in correcting posture and preventing pain. So how all that fit together. And also I'll share some tips related to how you can work pain-free when you're working from home. So first, we should know that what exactly a sitting for long time is doing to us. Again, and it's not good. So again, so there has been adverse effect of prolonged sitting. So if you're, I'm just talking about data which is like before the pandemic, before this lockdown happened, and we talk about around 6.5 hours to 7 hours of sitting that people used to do in an 8-hour shift. So that's again, that's a lot of sitting, and this has increased over the last decade or so by 1.5 hours. And there has been not a particular study, but there has been a report by WHO which says that there has been a significant amount of sitting duration and decreased physical activity during this lockdown period. And just to take things in more perspective, that according to a 2016 study, Lancet, again a well-known research agency, so which talk about that how they found a correlation between sitting and serious health risk, and also there is an increased mortality risk because of sitting. And if people are aware of something called kizashi, which is a Japanese term which they are used for people who are kind of actually dying on their table because they work so hard and so much. So my question is human body made for sitting? Particularly, I would say no. So our body function best when it moves. So, and if you are observed an infant, it gets stronger when she moves her hands and legs, and then she start turning or crawling, and then she start walking. So that's how our body adapts when we do the movement. Similarly, if you have seen, or you can say the flip side to it, if you have seen a patient who is in bed, who is bedridden, and when you start moving that patient, because I being a physiotherapist, I work with them. If you start moving those patients, the joint become really stiff, and taking even a first step after, let's say, a 1 month of bed rest is totally difficult for them. So just to understand it further, so I want you to do one experiment, okay? So in this experiment, what I want you to do is just have your thumb like this and make a fist, okay? Hold it tight, as tight as, again, this should provide some discomfort, but you should hold it. And you should be holding it till the time I ask you to unwind it, okay? And let's just continue with the webinar. So, and we all have seen, must have seen all these pictures where there is a wrong sitting posture, there is a correct sitting posture, and then correct standing posture. Again, the banana thing that I was talking to you about is, if you can see how the banana shaped spine looks like. Okay, yes, this is wrong. So again, your head is forward and there is no support around your arm. You're also kind of weight is more onto your front sitting bone than on being on all of the bones. So again, this is a wrong posture. If you see somebody, you can directly make out. And this is a right sitting posture where what exactly is your back is supported to the backrest, your head is aligned to your shoulders, then your thigh is supported on the seat, your elbow is kind of supported on the elbow rest, and also the vision, the screen is right in front of you. Similarly, with the standing posture where the arm is supported and you're standing erect. Okay, but here is a catch. The thing is that you can't sit in these ideal posture, let's say 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but more than that, it becomes little cumbersome. Why? Because, so if you, sorry, so there is a problem with the video. Okay. So after 30 minutes, what exactly happens is that our body is lazy as well as it is intelligent at the same time. So whenever it senses an idle situation, so when you're sitting idle, or it try to minimize the energy expenditure, so it starts moving into more and more relaxed and sometimes in an awkward posture. For example, so during this lockdown, most of us haven't used our car for quite a long time, okay? And one day you go down, you have to go to the market, you go down and then you see, okay, yes, your one of the tire is flat and you don't have a spare tire which is working. So what you do, you have to drive that car to the next repair station or a service center, whichever is possible. So imagine if one of the car. So imagine if one of our service center is just 1 kilometer away. So what will happen is that there will be little bit amount of wear and tear, but it will be manageable for that tire. Okay, but if it is 3 kilometer away, there will be some irreversible damage, but we can correct it in terms of that. But what if we have to drive for a little longer? Okay, that will create a lot of chaos, a lot of problems into the car itself. So there will be an alignment issue, there will be some other issue which can crop up. Again, your car will use more and more fuel. Same thing happens with our body also. So again, I'll give you a reminder, just keep holding your fist. So same thing happens with our body. So there is a load on muscles which leads to muscle overuse, stress. There is a repetitive injury because our body kind of use it again and again. Okay, then muscle become dormant or weak. Okay, and then it causes pain. So this is how our body functions because there has been some problem which is going on. Okay. I'll just take, so if someone has his mic on, so if they can keep it on mute, please. Similarly, because there is eye strain, and a lot of people might have experienced this. So similar to our body, there are muscles in our eyes which help in functioning of our eyes. Okay, so but constant staring on laptop or computer screen, that kind of fatigue these muscles. And what exactly happens is, like, I am staring on a screen. So what happens is I can scroll down. So actually our eyes are not functioning, they're just idle. And the content around that is moving. Okay, and because of that, the movement, again, as I told you, that movement kind of greases our joint, movement greases our eyes and other body parts. So because of less movement, our eyes become dry, and that's why you feel itchy. You feel like there is little problem which is going on in your eyes as well. So now you can open up your fist. Okay. So similarly, so I think most of you have experienced there is slight discomfort or pain when you open up that thumb. Okay. Similarly, that's what happens when you sit for too long. Okay. So it can also, our back and neck can also start hurting. And according to Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, and sitting for too long can create back and neck pain. So in conclusion to the experiment that we have done now, is immobility or less movement is primary reason for posture related pain. Okay, it is not because you are sitting because just you are sitting, that's what the problem is coming. No, it is because that you are not moving while sitting. Okay, that's why the pain is coming. So long duration sitting, what it does is it leads to muscle weakness, tightness, which leads to body imbalances. Similarly to the car example that I gave you earlier. So is there a concept of right or wrong posture? So I disagree with this statement. What I see is there is an efficient posture and there is an inefficient posture. So when I say efficient posture, because different posture will give different stresses onto a muscle and joint while being in that posture. And depending on how long you hold that posture, the stress will kind of magnifies, it multiplies. And similarly, different posture suits different people. For example, if somebody has a back pain issue, okay, if you ask them to sit straight, okay, sitting straight, what it does is it will kind of make their back more and more stiff, and that stiffness will lead to more problem, more pain as such. Similarly, if somebody has a stooped posture and we ask them to, okay, just correct it, again, holding that corrected or over corrected posture for quite a long time is not natural to our body, and that can also you can say leads to pain. So that hence this is also an inefficient posture. So what you should do for an efficient posture? So there is a ergonomics. Ergonomics is not only about how you can say it's not only about the just the fancy chair or fancy table that you can just put in there. Ergonomics as a whole is about just creating an environment where your body is at ease, okay, and that ease help our posture making more and more efficient. But when you talk about this, there have been many studies which proves that it is not exactly help in preventing pain. So what I mean is not preventing pain is, yes, you can be in that posture for longer time. As I said, 30 minutes is where the posture changes or where something like that happens. But when you kind of be into that posture, you can go to slightly longer, maybe a 1 hour, without being affecting your body, without putting too much stress onto your muscles and the joints. So there are tips which I'll give it to you. So which will help us in preventing pain when you're working from home. Okay, so rather than worrying about the posture, focus should be just being physically active. When I say physically active, so physically active can be in different modes. So there can be burst physical activity which we can do like a couple of times in a day, just like just going taking a stairs up and down a couple of times in a day, or just walking around your house just for 5 minutes, or just doing few stretches when you get up from your seat and doing all that. So these are the burst physical activity which you can do throughout the day, or I would say every hour that is necessary. Then there is a general physical activity. When you are healthy, when you are physically active, when your muscles are strong, automatically the impact of sitting goes less and less. So doing a yoga or doing a strength training or a body weight training for that matter, or just going for a walk for 30 minutes walk, that is also a good idea to do. Okay, then again you just keep changing your posture. Okay, changing posture can be anything related to, if you just shift your posture from one side to another. So you just from one on the chair only, you can just go from one buttocks to the another buttocks, or you just stand when doing that whole thing. Then also there is a rule which we call it as in ergonomics, which is 20-20-20. So 20-20-20 rule is that you stand after every 20 minutes, look at the window or look at the any picture which is 20 feet away from you for 20 seconds. What that does is, again, it makes you active, and it also helps you in relaxing your eyes, because your vision increases, so your eyes also changes their the muscles also relaxes in that, so the eye strain also reduces. There are specific exercises which we can do to strengthen our postural muscles. For example, if you can see me, so just strengthening these muscles around your back of the neck or around here will help in just relieving pain around the when you're sitting for too long, and preventing neck pain. So doing all these, that will also help. Hydration. So hydration, when I say, because when you're working, one, you're just not aware about, okay, if you're feeling thirsty or not, but there has been researches which proves that hydration, our body get mildly dehydrated just by sitting. So there is a logic behind that which state that because of just sitting too long, our kidney function goes down, and there is an imbalance between fluid and electrolyte, and that leads to mild dehydration, which dehydration has a long implication in terms of our brain activity. Our brain becomes foggy, and it also helps, it also causes to decrease our productivity. And then the sleep. When you talk about sleep is nothing like a luxury or something. It's an essential recovery tool for us. When I say recovery tool, because if you don't sleep, your body doesn't recover. When your body doesn't recover, you don't function better. Your brain doesn't function better. Physically, you are weak. So again, because of the sleep, if the person going to a gym right now, most of people aren't. So and they do the exercise, there are more chances of injury in a sleep deprived person than the other one. So sleep is, and similarly, if you are not sleeping well and going to work, your brain won't function as much, and most of the people would have experienced this. Okay, so more in nutshell, the idea is to just move as much movement that you can do while doing the work. So that will help you in just keeping you physically fit. Okay. So from my side, the tip will be your best posture is your next posture. So just moving it around. Now I'll invite Miss Damini. So she will take over and speak on emotional well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Nandlal, for introducing me. I'm a counseling psychologist and a hypnotherapist. And today I am here so that I can share with you some of the psychological and the emotional impact that this lockdown has had on all of us, especially in the context of people who are working from home. Indeed, this is a very difficult time for all of us. We are juggling so many things at once, and there is a prevailing sense of confusion. So the whole idea is that how do I do what I am already doing to the best of my ability? And that is something that I would want to take all of you through. So the idea, according to me, is that all of us need to find our own sense of balance within and amidst all of this chaos. So what has really happened, in this lockdown, and let's say if we are talking in the context of staying at home and trying to balance work and home, what has happened is that one, it has created this sense of isolation. It's not just a physical isolation or a social isolation as such, but we are completely removed from our sense of normalcy. We are not connected to the things and the experiences which were normal, which were routine for us. Earlier, if there is a conflict at home and I'm feeling stressed out at home, I can just pack up and go to the office and just let myself relax, calm down, switch into another zone while I'm on my drive to work or when I'm at work. And I could do the same thing when I'm coming back from work, because home becomes the place for me where I can just leave the work troubles at office and I can get into a different personal, my happy relaxing zone. But there is nothing like that which is happening for us right now, and probably it's not going to happen for some more time to come. As a result of this, what has happened is that there is a personal and professional space fusion. By that, what I mean is that, we are working and living in the same space. We are eating there, we are sleeping there, we are working, we are taking calls, we are also managing our, internal and external conflict, everything in the same zone. So there are no clear boundaries now. Boundaries have gotten completely intertwined, or there is an investment that has taken place, which is also giving rise to a lot of stale energy. So the best part about being humans, and of course, even it holds true for animals as well, that we have emotions. Emotion simply means your energy is in motion. But when you are stuck in a place, your energy also gets stuck. And we know that when something is stuck, when something is not moving, it basically begins to get stale. And when that happens, what also happens is a lot of other changes that start coming about. Sometimes we realize and sometimes we don't. In the same breath, I would also like to, point out that what has also happened is that there is a lot of passive acceptance that is going on. So there are two kinds of acceptances rather. I would talk about one right now and one a few minutes later. So there is something called as passive acceptance, which means that, oh, this is the situation. Oh my God, what else can I do? What else can we do? I mean, this is it. And imagine if this is how I'm talking and to myself the whole day, or if I'm hearing people talk like this the whole day, it is bound to create feelings of defeat. It's going to make you feel, oh, I'm completely out of control, and it's going to bring up feelings of helplessness, which in effect are going to keep us in a stuck state, both physically as well as emotionally. And then the more stuck we are, the more we invite turmoil within our internal space. Because right now, what is also happening is that we are using a lot of our mental resources to balance everything, which is leading to a lot of mental exhaustion. It is leading to low productivity, it's leading to lack of motivation. There is anger, there is conflict, there is a lot of anxiety, frustration, there are mood dips. And all of this is happening because everything is now merged into one. There is no clear demarcation of anything, and we are just stuck in our physical and our emotional space. So then the question is that if this is what the case is, and it's going to be for some more time to come, what do? Can you do something? You can obviously do something, simply because if there is a problem, there is always going to be a solution. You may not get it immediately, but it's just round the corner. We just need to shake things up a bit. So, in my understanding, what I want to share with everyone is that the need of the hour is for us to be actively, in terms of acceptance. So, activate something called as active acceptance. It simply means that, okay, this is what the situation is. I may not like it, I may not want it, I hate it, nahi acha lag raha hai. Yet, this is the truth in the present moment. Ab ye hai. This is what the situation is. For example, I will have to work from home for an indefinite period of time. So, this new dynamic is my new normal. So, an active question would be, how do I make it work for me? What else can I do? What else can I do to make it better for me? And if you notice, the difference between how I spoke about passive acceptance is simply in terms of your mindset and in terms of your tone. So passive acceptance is like, oh my God, अब मैं क्या करूं? अब तो कुछ कर ही नहीं सकते. I can't do anything about it. This is what it is. But active acceptance is like, okay, this is what it is. How do I make it work? What can I do to make it better for me? What are my options? This active acceptance would lead you into a solution state in every area of your life, whether it's personal, whether it's professional. And once you do that, the next step that everyone needs to take on a really, really urgent basis is to reset and to restore. So what's happening is that, I've been speaking to a lot of people as to how are they managing their work life and their personal life, and everything is happening in the same place. You get up, you get ready, or maybe you don't get ready, and you just get into a work mode. Everything is working on an autopilot because we just have to do it. There is just no other way of doing it, right? So we are eating in the same place, we are sleeping in the same place, we will have a fight or a conflict, we will come and sulk in the same place. Because of all of that, as I said, energy is getting stale. So we need to reset and we need to restore. So, first of all, we need to provide a workable structure to our day. And it is very, very important that we start and end our day with something that we like, not just get into, just throw yourselves into work, or whether it's home work or whether it's, the office work. There has to be a demarcation. So when you get up in the morning and let's say you give 15 minutes to yourself, 20 minutes to yourself, where if possible you go for a walk, do some meditation, do some yoga, maybe play with your kids, play with your pet, engage with your family for some time, read the newspaper or listen to some music. Just begin your day with something that is only and only for you, that helps you to recharge, and then you move into a workspace. And after you have done everything for your day, even if you're ending your workday at 12 o'clock at night, leave 10-15 minutes for yourself, for something that helps you to relax. Is to take charge of your routine, and we need to sort of get off this, autopilot mode, because it doesn't work for too long. Having said that, the third thing, so once we have put these two things in place, the third step that we need to take is basically to learn how to detach, which means that we have to right now do two things simultaneously, is to integrate as well as to, segment. So when I'm talking about detachment, I'm simply talking about a switch on and a switch off mode. I'm saying that we need to create mental and physical barriers between our work and personal life. So when I'm working, I am working, and I'm going to take my breaks in between so that it helps my energy to sort of, balance out, and I can calm down, I can let some ideas flow in. After my workday is done, I switch off and I move into my personal zone. What really helps is having a clear demarcation between your personal and your professional zone. So maybe there is a work desk that you have and you work only at that desk. Please don't eat and get into a conflict or use that desk to sulk after you've had a, let's say, a difficult call with somebody. Could be your senior or could be your coworker, or even if there's someone in your family. Don't use your workspace to do everything together. So once you've finished your work, move into a personal zone. If you can have two different rooms for working and for spending your me time, that's great. For some of us who, let's say, have a restriction of space, maybe you can just designate a small area, which is your work area, and the other area can be, your personal space where you can just sit down, relax for 15-20 minutes, and then move into something else. And this is the most important thing, something that all of us really need to do right now, which is that while we are busy handling so many things, there's work life at one end, there is something or the other happening in the personal front. There is, a looming sense of uncertainty and insecurity about just anything and everything possible right now. We need to give ourselves some downtime. Downtime simply means that yes, there are difficult thoughts, yes, there are difficult emotions, there is anxiety, there is anger, there is frustration, my mind just doesn't stop buzzing at times. It's still important that you allow these thoughts and emotions to come up and settle down in their own time. Distress in this situation is very, very normal because the mind is in a fight and a flight mode. It's constantly trying to figure out, what do I need to fight for, what do I need to escape from, what do I need to work for, how do I make it work. So this is bound to create a lot of emotional upheaval. So rather than fighting the emotions also that are coming up, it's important that we understand that distress is normal, and the emotions can come and go in our own time. And to sort of take this idea a little further, what I would request everyone is, if you want to switch on your videos, by the way, for this small activity, which is going to take like 2 minutes, you can just don't switch on your mics. And I would like, yeah, some of the people to kind of switch on their videos. And I'm going to show you what downtime really looks like. Those who don't want to switch on their videos can at least do this with me. And when we are in the Q&A section, you can let me know how this activity really worked for you. Those who want to switch on their videos, most welcome. So let's say this register, and you can use a register, you can even use a pen, a cushion, a pillow, a piece of paper, and do this with me. And I urge you to actually do this with me, even if you don't want to be seen. So what I would like you to do is that imagine that this register, these are all your thoughts and all your emotions that keep coming into your mind all the time. And let's say if I were to hold out this register like this, so what I'm effectively doing is I am engaging in a struggle to push these thoughts away. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to feel this way. I want this feeling to just go away. And if I keep doing this the whole time, I mean, I don't know about you, but my shoulder is going to start hurting. Shoulders are going to start hurting. My neck will start hurting. And I can't keep doing this the whole time. The more energy I spend in fighting, the more exhausted I'm going to get. With the result that right now, I can only actually effectively focus on the register. I can't even focus on the webinar here. And I'm sure that when all of us get into this, struggle mode with our thoughts, we kind of lose sight of what is important for us. So now that my shoulder is hurting, what I would effectively do, and like you all to also do, is to just put this register, this cushion, pillow, paper, pen, whatever you are holding, just put it gently in your lap. And now, at least I can talk to you very comfortably. So what is happening is that I haven't pushed my thoughts away. They haven't gone anywhere. The anxiety, the anger, frustration, everything is pretty much there. But it's just resting comfortably on my lap, and I can still continue to do whatever it is that I am doing. This is what I mean by a downtime. Let it come, let it go in its own time. Focus on what you can focus at the moment, something that really means a lot to you, whether it's playing with your kids, focusing on your work, meditating, just relaxing, even if it's not doing anything. Allowing yourself that downtime from time to time is very, very important because we're living in a very, very uncertain zone right now. So, to sum it up, all I would like to say is that yes, we are surrounded by uncertainty. All of these feelings are very normal, they are very natural. And if we put these four things into perspective, that is, if we be active, we reset, time to time, we detach, and then we allow ourselves, that downtime, we should be good to go. However, if anybody is struggling with any difficult emotions, despite doing all of these things, you feel that the turmoil is still too much, this would be the time to reach out and get the help. There is no reason, no need for any of us to sit with the difficulty and prolong it, because the longer it takes, the more difficult it's going to be for us to get out of it. On that note, I am going to pass on the forum to Mr. Anand, and he's going to take it over from here.
Thank you, Dominique, and hello everyone. I hope my screen is visible now. So a short introduction about me. So I work as a principal consultant and advisor, HR in a leading IT company, and I have about 22 years of work experience. I also operate as an adjunct professor in a business school, teaching happiness, and I authored Happiness at Work, which was published by Sage. So the focus for me is going to be that if you are a leader, manager, and you have a team, and you know the situation that we are in, and Nandalal talked about the physical aspect of it, and Damini talked about the emotional aspect of it. But can you help? Can you help your team? Can you do something about it? The answer is that yes, you can do something about it. And in this, I plan to give you 3 tips and also discuss why they work and how they work. So we are going to talk about leader and team building. It's not only important that you take care of your team, but you also take care of yourself as a leader. And so all these 3 tips are also applicable to you as an individual. But we will focus on it more as you as a leader of a team here in this session. So there is something called as cognitive overload. Okay, so cognitive overload happens when the problem that we are trying to solve exceeds the resources that we are able to bring to it. So that is what is called as cognitive overload. All of us have something called as working memory. Working memory is the short memory that we use to solve a problem and then forget about it. So the simple example of working memory is, let us say you are calling a call center, and after a few conversations, the person says that this is not the right number to call. Will you note down this number? And you don't have a paper and pen at hand. So you quickly say, okay, tell me what is the number. So 95634257989. So you remember that. Okay, thank you. And then you go to the phone and say 9563525, and whatever the number is, you quickly type and call. You have not written down, right? You have used what is called as a working memory capacity to be able to do that. And all working memory capacities are very limited. But this is what we require for problem solving. Let us say in the midst of this conversation where you are trying to remember this phone and then immediately dial it on your phone, somebody calls your name. You got temporarily distracted, and that's it. You are no longer able to do that. So in real life, we need the working memory capacity to be efficiently used for us to be able to solve problems. So you will notice it in your team when they are feeling distracted. And what causes a working memory capacity run out or a cognitive overload is when a distracting thought comes and interferes in the individual. So when a distracting thought comes and interferes, the person is not able to solve problems. The person is not able to follow instructions. You ask for report A, person gave report B, right? And some total mistake has happened in one of the calculations, or the title has not been reflecting correctly, or the summary has not been written well. So 1,000 things that we all face as managers and we are trying to get work done, that happens because our team is under what is called as a cognitive overload, and our team is under a cognitive overload because they are not using their working memories very effectively. So what can you do? One thing you can do is to basically chunk work. So at the end of the day, or when you have passed on an instruction, when you have arrived at a decision in a meeting, and just spend 2-3 more minutes, which you may not do in a physical meeting, but right now in the virtual mode, spend 2-3 more minutes trying and saying that, okay, we started with this problem, we looked at these facts, we have all collectively come to this conclusion, and ask 2-3 people to repeat what they think is the conclusion to make sure that that chapter is closed, that number has been remembered and the number has been dialed, the equivalent of it is done. So this is what is called as a working memory capacity. You can test, even when you go back after this webinar to your family, whether they are running out of working memory capacity or they are overloaded on their cognition by simply playing a very little game. And the game is what is called as a N-back game. N-back game is basically you ask a question and then the other party or your family member, let us say your mother, your father, or your spouse, is not supposed to answer that question. Then you ask a second question, and when you ask a second question, they are supposed to answer your first question. When you ask a third question, they are supposed to answer the second question. When you ask the fourth question, so it is one back. So in this case, they are answering the one previous question. In a 2-back version of it, they have to answer the second previous question, not the, when you answer the first question, they have to be silent. The second question, they have to be silent. When you ask the third question, they have to answer the first question and so on. And when you play this game with others, like your family members, people who are running out of working memory, who have interfering thoughts, who are worried about something at the background, will not be able to play this game. And that's a very simple test or trick to make sure that everybody is functioning at their peak as much as they can happen. And why do we have these interfering thoughts? We have these interfering thoughts because there are so many uncertainties, as Damini talked a little while earlier. There are lots of uncertainties. We are in the fight or flight mode, and which is one of the reasons why we are having these interfering thoughts. And what is the way to get out of interfering thoughts? The simplest way to get out of interfering thoughts is to encourage mindfulness in the team. And what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is a very big expression, but the simple way to understand it is to simply say that you need to be able to know what is happening to you, observe what is happening to you in your mind, and similarly, you should be able to observe what is happening in your team members' minds, in their emotions. You should be able to describe that very precisely. So when you are having a meeting or when you are having a chat with a colleague and you find that they are not mindful, one way to bring mindfulness to that discussion is to reflect feeling and reflect meaning. So you feel that this is going to happen. So the moment you say you feel that this is going to happen, you are focusing the individual back to what exactly they are feeling. And that itself will increase the mindfulness of the individual. Then reflect meaning. If I understand you correctly, this is exactly what you seem to be saying. Have I got you correctly or not? So then the person is forced to go back and consider what exactly did they say. Otherwise, we can be very fuzzy and confused in the way we communicate in discussions, meetings, joint problem solving, etc. So mindfulness is the capacity by which we are able to observe what is happening inside us. We are able to describe that very accurately, and we are able to act with awareness. So when we are doing something, we know this is exactly what we are doing. And we are trained, or we are mature enough not to judge very quickly, and we are mature enough not to react very quickly. When you are mindful and you encourage this mindfulness in your meetings, in your interactions, in your teams, of trying to be observant, descriptive, act with awareness, be non-judgmental and non-reactive, you increase their capacity or the space between stimulus and response. So what is happening to them? They are able to consider it a little calmly, a little bit with a sense of detachment, the same detachment, idea of detachment that Damini talked about a little while ago. So you can increase mindfulness by simply in conversations, reflecting on feeling. So what exactly is the person feeling? Oh, I'm not sure. What are you not sure about? Maybe you are feeling that you won't be able to get it right. Maybe you won't get this fact. So reflect meaning and again reflect feeling. So why are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling afraid? So are you feeling burdened? So try to reflect feeling. So increase the conversations of feeling and meaning and the reflection of feeling and meaning when you interact with others. So encourage mindfulness. So reduce cognitive overload. How do you reduce cognitive overload? By trying to summarize what we started with, what facts we considered, and how did we come back and come to this decision. And when you find people getting lost or having interfering thoughts, and if culture permits, and if you are friendly with the person, actually challenge them to play the one-back game. Say that I'm not sure you are actually using your working memory well. So let us play a one-back game. So I'm going to ask the first question, don't answer. Second question, answer the first question, and see how far they are able to go and get it correct. So that's the first tip, and encourage mindfulness is the second tip. And the third tip is, see, there are times when we can be independent, heroic, do things on our own, right? And these are not those times. In these times, the wise person is the person who is able to ask for help. And the wise person and the kind person is the one who gives help. So you need to encourage in your team the ability to seek social support, to be able to ask for help. The hero is not the person who struggled alone. The hero is the person who actually asked for help in a very timely manner, without hesitation, and really talk about stories of people seeking help and getting benefited, and talk about stories of people giving help and adding value to others. And every day, at least once in a day, in a conversation with your team, in your conversation with your colleagues, talk about an instance where somebody intelligently sought help and somebody kindly gave help. And when we recite these stories and keep that in our mind every day, we will also have a tendency to ask for help and offer help. So, in a very curious experiment, people were lying about, and then the experimenter was there, and they said the experiment was going to start, but then the experiment had already started. So, a couple of students of the experimenter came down, and one dropped the pages or books or whatever they were carrying. And in one instance, the other person came quickly to rush and help. And then in another instance of the same experiment, when they dropped, they had to pick it up all alone. And during the next 1 hour, they observed all the participants in the experiment. When they were in the context where they observed somebody asking for help and somebody giving help, they did the same thing. And this idea of pro-sociality, being social, seeking help, offering help, that is very important for our long-term well-being. In fact, the quality of our relationships, and there is a very beautiful saying in psychology that if you have 2 a.m. friend, somebody whom you can call at 2 a.m. without feeling embarrassed about it, and that person will take the call, and you both can have a conversation for 20 minutes about what is bothering you. If you have many such 2 a.m. friends, you are actually leading a good life. Your heart is likely to be healthy. Your brain will not get Alzheimer's. So this is one single thing, a high pro-social orientation that seems to improve all our health, well-being, happiness, and multiple other parameters very significantly. So in your organization, in your team, increase the culture of pro-sociality. Share stories about seeking help and offering help, and that is the wise person today. So these are the 3 tips that I wanted to give as a leader and manager. And hopefully when you try and practice it, you will have some very interesting experiences and learnings. And feel free to customize the experiment. You may not have a culture of being a very social person with your team, but slowly start from where it is comfortable and slowly move the needle towards pro-sociality. So reduce cognitive overload in your team by chunking information, by closing things that you start, conversations that you start, collectively spending time on decisions. Increase mindfulness by actually reflecting on feeling and meaning in conversation and making people very conscious of whatever is happening inside them. Right. So let them surface what is happening inside them. And with that level of mindfulness that gets created, they will be better equipped to solve problems. And thirdly, increase the culture of pro-sociality in your team. And these are very important, even in normal times, but become much more important in the trying times that we live in. And I really wish that you all will stay safe and practice some of these tips and really go further. I now request Mr. Yash to help facilitate the questions that have been posed. And depending on the question, one of us will be happy to answer this. Over to you, Yash.
Thank you, Mr. Anand, for your valuable insights. Now, we would like to invite you, the audience, to ask questions and chat with us. This question and answer segment is for information and educational purposes. We are not able to respond to specific questions or comments about personal situations, diagnosis, or treatment, or provide any clinical opinions. However, the idea of this is to question our speakers about if your posture is important. What are the exercises to do while sitting? What happens when you don't follow a particular routine? Or I have trouble sleeping these days. How do I improve my sleep? And so on and so forth. So please go ahead and ask any more questions that you might have. You can do this by simply commenting on the chat box provided in this session. And once we have received your question, I will accordingly address to one of our key speakers, or you can address the key speaker directly as you may please, and they will reply to your questions accordingly. Now I have opened the chat and the mic button also, so accordingly you can also enable this feature and get in touch with us directly and unmute yourself, and you can ask the question freely.
So as the questions are coming, Yash, I just thought I will ask Nandlal that when we were children, we have been taught to sit straight and upright and so on. So after hearing you, it looks like you should move and feel comfortable, and that is what you are advising. So what you have been telling our children is all quite wrong.
No, so the thing is that being straight is never the ideal position to be in. So, okay, you can be there for let's say 30 minutes, 40 minutes, or maybe an hour. Okay, but to maintain that posture, maintain that position require lot of energy. That's our body is not used to. One, because our muscles are not strong enough to hold. One, being strong enough is one thing, and also holding for that long. The stamina to hold that long is not enough. So because of that, so being in that posture, so the idea is to just getting in and out of the postures. Okay, it is not about just restricted or just being stable or being just erect. Okay, being erect is good, it looks good cosmetically, it's totally fine, and all those things are there, but the issue in terms of holding that is not good for us. That's what I meant.
Right. And Damini, I think when does someone realize that they need to take external help, that it is too overwhelming and they can't solve on their own, with some of the tips that we have given? When do you realize that you have to really seek external help?
Okay, one of the key indicators for that would be that some aspect of your functioning, or let's say the entire functioning, is getting compromised. And by functioning, I mean that persistently there is difficulty in working. There are some emotional bouts that keep coming up, and you cannot seem to control them. There are changes in appetite. Maybe you're eating more, you're eating less, you don't feel like eating, sleep is getting disturbed. There are persistent thoughts that don't let you concentrate, and no matter what you do, you just can't seem to disengage with the thought. You are getting into persistent anxiety cycles, or there are the mood is constantly low, and everything is sort of has been going on for more than 2 weeks. So if any of these symptoms persist for more than 2 weeks, and you internally feel that there is something not okay with you, you are not being able to manage some aspect of your life, or maybe all the aspects of your life, that's the time when the alarm bells are ringing, and we need to go out there and take some extra help.
Understood. That's clear. So I think you have a question, Damini. So someone has asked, do I talk to friends? Because I think every time I do, I may be getting different advices. So how do I really, or should I share or not share some of my emotional travails? I think that's one of the ways the person seems to be asking.
Okay. So the question is that should I share or not share? Sharing is definitely very good. If you have like a good bunch of friends or relatives, somebody who's close to you, somebody who understands you, really like gets you in that sense, you are comfortable in sharing every emotion that comes up or every thought, and talking to them helps you get a perspective, helps to get you moving in a particular direction. So yes, sharing with friends and family members is definitely important if you feel that you are in a comfortable, safe space to share with them. However, if you feel that we don't, some of us, maybe we don't have that kind of support system, we don't know whom to talk to, or even when we are talking, we are not able to sort of imbibe what they are telling us, it's not getting in, it's not working, then maybe it's time to move to a neutral person. So you can talk to a counselor, you can talk to a therapist if you feel that sharing with friends and family members, which is often the the first step for all of us, that is sort of not working for you, either because you can't share, or despite sharing you can't feel a change within you. So that's the time when you move to a neutral zone.
So yes, I think Devraj wants to ask a question to me.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. I'm Devraj here. My question is that sometimes we feel in the corporate culture that the culture of communication from top to bottom is skewed. And as a subordinate, one is a little hesitant to provide solutions as it may unruffle feathers somewhere. Can you advise a good approach to it?
Once or twice or even thrice, the subordinate should try, giving that solution and making sure that there is nothing beyond the solution, in the whole deal. And after 2-3 times, if it didn't work, or it has probably gotten into some sort of a different kind of mode, then they have to be a little conscious about how it is being taken. And even as it is being taken negatively, somewhere the person or the team member should not lose their heart, and they should still find out what is driving this person to react to me this way. And if we know what is driving this person, calmly think, what could be driving this person to react to me this way, and see if that can be addressed. And after trying that also, if it doesn't work, then you will have to take care of yourself. So that's the sequence, one would say. Firstly, by default, start with the belief that it will work and people will take it in the right spirit. And if it doesn't, reflect why is it that this person is reacting this way, probably some conditioned response. Like, the story of Tenali Rama is there, right? He made the cat hate milk because the cat had a poor experience of drinking hot milk once. And therefore it started hating milk. So individuals who get conditioned and they, whenever they encounter something like that, they remember a bitter incident in their life, and therefore their reactions are often inappropriate.
Right.
And so something like that could have happened to the person. So one has to reflect whether that is driving the person to react that way, and then one will be able to handle it more effectively.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. The next question is from Ayush for Dr. Nandlal Pathak. What is ideal posture while sleeping?
So again, it's more about the comfort of the individual. So the posture is not as important as sleep. So that's what I would say. So if you get sleep while sleeping on your stomach, that's an ideal posture for you. Beside that, I would say, okay, so and the posture thing that he wants to take it away in terms of, yes, you need to take a pillow, but pillow should not be more thicker than your forearm. Okay, so that's the whole idea, because naturally, if you don't use the pillow, our hand goes just around here and that support our head. Okay, so the idea is to just be as comfortable as possible. Okay, if you have any problem, let's say if you have a back pain, okay, keeping a pillow under the knee or in between the knees while sleeping on the side is a good idea. Okay, or if you have some problem in your neck, okay, supporting the neck again with a towel or pillow when you're lying on your back is again a good idea to do. Okay, so posture can be anything, and where you get some sleep. Okay, again, as I said, sleep is more important than the posture. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you, Dr. Nandlal. Next question is from Akansha Rana. It is for Ms. Damini Grover. How to deal with emotional problems and stay positive?
Okay. Thanks, Akansha, for asking that question. And see, it's a very broad question, that how to deal with emotional problems and stay positive. The thing is that when you are going through emotional problems, whether it's one area or a lot of areas in your life, it is naturally very difficult to stay positive. So that would be like, putting like an unnecessary load on yourself, that I have to manage the conflict or, whatever the problem is, and stay positive. So in my opinion, what you need to do is that whichever area is causing a problem, you need to understand or start working towards sorting out that problem. Because the minute the problem starts getting sorted, or some areas start coming, within your purview, you feel you can make some sense of them, a sense of relief is going to settle in. And the more relaxed you start feelings of positivity, or, having positive thoughts, that's just going to be a natural byproduct, right? And otherwise, even like putting the two together, I would say that what you can also do is that many a times, we have to live within a conflict zone. We have to work within a particular, issue, and maybe it's not the time to solve it. Maybe we don't have the resources or whatever. The idea would still be that keeping this in the background, like letting it stay there, try and focus on the things which still make your life meaningful. Just because there is a problem in a particular area, it does not mean that the other areas of your life need to be compromised upon. So you can start taking care of, let's say, your health, you can start taking care of your work, you can start taking care of your personal life. And gradually, when you start finding meaning and fulfillment in the other areas, it would again ease off some load, which would again give you some resources to deal with the problem at hand, right? So there are two ways. One is to draw focus into your meaningful activities, things that you value the most, areas of your life that mean a lot to you, keeping the conflict in the background, taking your own time to resolve it. Or the other thing is that you start resolving it, you start taking that load off from your mind so that you relax, and then that can have like a domino effect on the other areas of your life. So I hope that answers your question.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Damani. The next question is from Shivam Kumar. Do exercise affect the ability to maintain good posture? That would be for Dr. Nanlal Pathak. Please go ahead.
So yes, if your muscles are strong, if you are able to maintain a good posture, that you can say directly proportionate to your muscle strength. Okay, and when you exercise, your muscle strength increases. Okay, and because of that, the whole posture improves. So yes, it is definitely there. Okay, when you talk about posture related exercises, so there are few exercises which I suggested earlier. So if you want to improve the posture for your upper body, let's say neck, or if somebody has a forward neck posture, what we call it, so one going forward like this. So for that, I would advise if you strengthen the muscles around the neck, around here, or strengthen the upper back muscles, that's also a good idea. Again, if somebody has a sway back posture where they stand with the hip going forward, for that I would suggest strengthening the core muscles, the muscles around your stomach and muscles around your low back area. That will again will be a good idea to strengthen. So yes, it does affect our ability to maintain a good posture.
So thank you all for raising your questions. Now I request other audience members to also raise their questions as they may be available to you, or any doubts that you might have. This will help you and our key speakers to address these issues in this live session, so you can get a remedy or a solution that might help you further better yourself. So I have opened the mics again. Please go ahead. The next question is from Dr. Gupta. Dr. Gupta, please unmute your mic, and accordingly you can proceed, and one of our key speakers would be able to address your issues. Please go ahead.
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
We at times deal with situations in which a patient is totally drained out and he is like looking for all emotional support from a doctor. And we at the far end of the disease, we see that we cannot provide much hope to this patient. And patient is willing that you say some positive words. We on our own want to give a positive outlook to the entire disease process and the outcome, but the legalities and the legal formalities and the law forces us to tell the truth to the patient. And when the truth is said, overtly the patient feels scared. And when the truth is told covertly, the patient at the end feels that something has been hidden from him. It is a difficult situation for us at times, because at times we ourselves are not very clear what way the things may turn out to be. How do we go about in such a situation? How do we prognosticate the patient? How do we tell the patient to remain calm, not to disturb us much, so that the patient also does not feel and the doctor is also legally safe?
Dr. Gupta, breaking the news that something terrible has happened to somebody or that person may not be with us or with you for a long time now, it is going to be difficult no matter how much you sugarcoat it, no matter how you try to say it. So first and foremost, like the basic understanding or the basic acceptance needs to be there that no matter what you say or how you say, there is going to be some consequence which is not going to be very polite. It's going to be difficult for the person to accept it, to understand it, and then expecting the person to stay a little calm in that moment. I mean, if you're talking about the patient, that is also in some situations a bit unrealistic. So what I would suggest is that the idea for a healthcare practitioner, when we are dealing with difficult situations and a very difficult news like this, is not to be blunt, is not to present the news without any emotion, but to present it as calmly worded, as comfortably as you possibly can, within your knowledge, within your limitations. And I'm pretty sure that during the time you have worked with a particular patient, you end up developing a sense of how the patient is likely to react, how the family is likely to react. So in that moment, especially in these critical moments, it's very, very important to just take a step back and to see that what kind of people am I dealing with. The minute that, you will know that, okay, these people are likely to react with some volatility, these people are likely to take it slightly calmly. So that would give you a sense of a structure that will help you to perceive the situation better. And having said that, try and say it as comfortably as possible. The more blunt we become with these kind of in these situations and with these kind of news items, we are likely to create an upheaval that even we can't handle. So the idea is to be as comfortable as possible and to expect that some upheaval is going to be there. That's sort of like unavoidable. So when you work with that, you're able to take a step back, you're able to assess the people that you're dealing with, and then you can structure your response accordingly. So does that answer your question?
Fine, thank you, Damini. I think you have been able to sugarcoat it pretty well.
We're glad it helped.
We received a question from Shivan Kumar. Sometimes when we are working with a team on certain problems and because of few members' major fault and minor fault of other members, we lose it. And then the whole member starts blaming weakest number. So my question is, why do so and how to stop these behaviors? So I believe, Mr. Anand, this question is for you. Please go ahead.
Sure. I think it's a very fair one. So teams can deal with these kind of issues in two different ways. Okay? So one is to make sure that everybody has a distinct role to perform, and the pro-social environment that I talked to you about, increase the pro-social environment, where seeking help and helping others is very much also part of performance. So that's one way to tackle that difficulty, where you have a blame game going on when something goes wrong and different people have different things to do. Now, if the team is continuously working with each other for a long time, then we do an intervention as follows. We sit down and actually force the team to confront the issues and say that, I'll give an example of a format. Let us say we are 10 of us working together in a team, and this kind of misgiving is there amongst us that, somebody is contributing, somebody is not contributing, and we are not willing to confront it. So one very difficult way to do that is to set a day aside and then in confidence distribute 100 points among the 10 of us in terms of the proportion of what is the level of contribution of each individual. And when each one of them does that in confidence, and when you tabulate all the scores and put that out for everyone anonymously without saying who said who gave how many scores to whom, then it sorts of gives a barrier. Then you look at the individuals who have been rated low and the individuals who have been rated not in the middle and the individuals who have been rated high, and then divide them up and then facilitate a discussion and say, okay, why do you believe this happens? So the people who are rated low will first tend to externalize and say, because I don't get support or my role has a dependency and so on. Like that, there is a very deeper and far more difficult way to confront the underlying misgiving. And once we confront the underlying misgiving and they get over it, and it's to be done under a trained facilitator, once you do that, then the underlying misgiving will go, and then everybody will be back again. So one is to separate the role and increase the pro-sociality. So two people are not doing the same thing and blaming each other. That is one way to do it. The second, more difficult way, the bitter pill, is to set aside a day and really try to bring the data out in anonymous format as to who is contributing how much to the overall success of the team. And the second one should be done only by a trained facilitator, because if it is done just like that, it can actually intensify the conflict. The idea is to surface all the conflicting elements and find out how to make it work better. So those are the two ways in which one can do it.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. I hope, Shivam, it answers your doubts. Now, the next question we received was for Mr. Anand by Devraj. In leadership, how does a leader tread between legitimate authority and a liberal way of working with subordinates?
Right. So, yeah, that's a very good question. And this is a classical dilemma between what we call as task orientation and people orientation. So the general rule is, what do you believe is the state of affairs of the team, right? So if the team is capable, then you become liberal, empower, and so on. If you believe the team is not capable, then you tell, don't ask, right? So the spectrum between telling and asking depends on the leader's assessment of capability of the team. The second thing that it depends on is how fast decisions need to be taken. For example, if you are in war and you are the commander of a unit, you better give orders, right? Otherwise, everybody's life is in danger. Whereas if you are a member of a group where creativity is called for, if you give orders, nobody will write poetry when you put pen on their forehead, right? They can't write poetry. So if the nature of work is a little more creative, you will have to engage the deeper individual rather than give orders. So the degree to which you will do either of it depends on really two factors: your assessment of the capability and motivation of the team, right? So that's one. And the second is the context in which we find ourselves as a team. So is it a context in which you will have to turn around something, or is it something where you are doing well and you have to really align the things a little bit better, tune it here, tune it there, and then really make it better? So depending on what the context the team finds itself in, either of these two will work.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. I hope that this answers your question.
It's a great answer. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, Devraj.
Thank you, Devraj. Now, Aura had a question. How are you doctors keeping the stress away? Personally, knowing people, all the eyes are on you during these trying times. And does that give you extra responsibility of setting an example? So I believe Dr. Nanda and Damini, you can both pitch in here in regards to the model.
So, Aura, I think it's what I perceive from this question is more about COVID-19. No, I think it's more about epidemic and how the doctors are responding. So again, sorry to break you to Aura. So I am not responsible for the treatment of any of the coronavirus patients till now. But whatever I have spoken to my colleagues who are working in this field right now, yes, they are. But so we, as a clinician, for us, the patient has always have a responsibility. So in terms of treating that patient, it's always stand first, then anything else. And that's how every doctor till now who are on the forefront, or what we call as corona warriors. So that's what they are doing, and they can trying to help people in whatever way they can. I think that's what. Yes, there is an extra sense of responsibility, but they are trying to do their best.
Damini, would you like to add something?
So thank you, Aura, for asking that question, because that seems to come from a place of, empathy for all us healthcare workers. The thing is that our stress levels, yes, they do tend to shoot up in difficult situations. We are all, as I mentioned earlier, sailing in the same boat. And yes, being on the front line, whether it's taking care of somebody's physical health or mental health, we do have a greater added responsibility. And the first step that we need to take care of is to take care of our own mental and physical health, because if we don't do that, we would not be in a position to provide help to anybody else. So whatever precautions or whatever measures that essentially we ask everyone else to take, it is our foremost responsibility to use all of those things for our own selves. And having said that, this is of course so difficult, and whenever we are faced with a crisis situation, and I think that would hold true for all healthcare workers, that we don't get to take the time off, because automatically the responsibility button sort of switches on, and we know that we have to kind of dive into it. So in that sense, we kind of get into a lot of active stress management roles. So all the things that we are asking the general public to do, we have to do this pretty much for ourselves as well. And yes, there are a lot of healthcare workers who should be taking more help than they are right now. That is something which is essentially missing. We don't get the kind of support many a times that we require, because people probably think that we don't need it. So that's just one gap that we end up facing. But I guess, everyone ends up establishing their own small community where they can reach out and they can ask for help. So I guess ultimately we all have the same coping mechanisms, we have the same resources. It's just that we need to be a little more mindful, and we need to use them a lot more than people who are not in this field, so that we don't get burnt out. So whether it's meditation, whether it's sharing, whether it's asking, whether it's seeking therapy ourselves, whether it's getting into exercise, unwinding, we need to do that a lot more than people who are not in this field. Whether or not we end up doing it, that's a different question. But that's the need of the hour for us, and will always. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Ms. Damini. I hope, Aura, that did answer your question. And next question is also for Ms. Damini from Ria. Regret is high chance of us reaching a burnout stage, since we do everything within four walls, like our home. So how can we avoid that?
Okay, how can you avoid burnout, right? That's the question?
Yes, that is it.
Okay. Bria, thanks for asking that. So I understand that, a lot of us are struggling with this burnout syndrome. The thing is that I would not tell you that if you do certain things, you will not get burnt out, because burning out is very natural. And when we are in a crisis situation, we are using, we are literally putting everything that we have into our life, and we are managing everything. So burnout is going to happen. It's natural. If we get scared, if we get overwhelmed that, oh my God, I'm getting burnt out and I can't do anything, just go back to the whole register exercise that I just did. That creates a problem. Once you understand that, okay, there would be times, there would be days, or maybe a week or so where I might be hitting a burnout. At that very moment, the idea is just to take a break. You need to take a mental, you need to take a physical break from whatever it is that is causing that burnout. Journal, talk to people, talk to your friends, get in touch with a therapist, establish routines which will help you to unwind, that will help you to take care of your burnout. So while I'm not saying that in this situation, if you do all of these things, a burnout is not going to happen, because this situation is going to go on for a long time. What I'm saying is that there is no need to be scared of this burnout. Just understand that it's your mind and body asking for rest. Give it that rest, give yourself time to recover, and then bounce back into your routine. So that's how it's going to work. And even normally in your routine, if you can incorporate, other than work and the house chores that all of us end up doing, if you can actually mix and match some recreation, even if it's just watching like stand-up comedy videos, 10 minutes a day, watching some random funny videos, playing with your pet, talking to somebody, just taking a bath just because you feel like it. I mean, anything that helps you to unwind, that is disconnected from work, that is disconnected from your house chores, that would really help to, let your energy sort of revive, and then you can keep going into your work mode as and when you have to.
I hope that answered your questions. On behalf of all our group companies and knowledge partners, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found this information and dialogue valuable. Please do note that you will receive a survey asking for feedback on this event. Your insights will truly help us shape future events such as this. Good night.